Hey, my culty crime crew, it's Bubbles, your host, and welcome back to another thrilling episode of Cozy Cults and Crimes. I hope everyone has had a good week this week. Lately, I have been on another true crime documentary binge, which might explain why my cat Sabi has been giving me some seriously suspicious looks. He sits on his cat tower and watches me and just looks at me weird. He also seems to think that my hands are his personal chew toys. So if any of you have any tips on how to stop that, please send them my way. My hands could really use a break. They are so scratched up. But in all seriousness, my latest true crime obsession has led me to a chilling case that I want to share with you all. It's the story of the Yorkshire Ripper, a case that not only gripped an entire nation in fear, but also exposed some deep-rooted societal issues that still continue to resonate today. After watching the Netflix docu-series The Ripper, I was struck by the chilling reminder that danger can lurk anywhere. There's a powerful scene in the documentary of a sign at one of these Reclaim the Night marches that I'll talk about later that proclaimed it could be the man next door. This killer was not some distant boogeyman, but potentially someone they knew, someone they trusted. This unsettling reality, coupled with the media's dismissive attitude towards some of the victims, created an environment where women felt increasingly vulnerable and unheard. But before we embark on this dark journey, a quick content warning as always. Tonight's episode will be discussing sensitive topics, including murder, sexual assault, and violence against women. So listener discretion is advised. If you're feeling particularly sensitive or vulnerable, please feel free to skip this episode or listen at a later date when you're feeling a bit more emotionally prepared. So with that, grab your favourite blanket, your favourite beverage, and settle in, my culty crime crew. It's time to face this darkness together as we uncover the chilling truth behind the Yorkshire Ripper. Alright guys, picture this. It's the late 1970s in the UK, a time of both change and uncertainty. The once mighty British Empire is fading fast, and the economic hardship casts a long shadow over the nation. In Yorkshire, the heartland of the Industrial Revolution in the UK, the decline of traditional industries like coal mining and textiles has left deep scars on the landscape and its people. The streets of Leeds, Bradford, and other bustling cities now bear the marks of this economic hardship. Boarded up shops, crumbling factories, and unemployment lines paint a bleak picture. The mood is tense, fueled by social unrest and the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. Amidst this backdrop of uncertainty and unease, a predator emerged from the shadows, his brutal attacks shattering the illusion of safety and plunging the region into a state of fear. The first victim, Wilma McCann, was 28 years old and a mother of 4, and she was simply trying to get back to her children on a cold October night in 1975. Wilma's murder was a brutal and senseless act of violence, leaving her family and community devastated. But to truly understand the impact of this crime, we need to understand Wilma, the woman behind the headlines. She was more than just a victim. She was a vibrant young woman, full of life and laughter. She loved to sing and dance, and her children were her world. Yes, she had faced her fair share of struggles, including a difficult marriage and financial hardship, but she always managed to find joy in the simple things. Wilma dreamed of a better future for her children. It was a future tragically stolen from her on that cold October night. Wilma's murder marked the beginning of a 5-year reign of terror that would grip northern England for years to come. The killer, whose identity remained shrouded in mystery, would leave a trail of devastation and fear in his wake. The killer was far from finished after Wilma. In 1976, he claimed more victims, his attacks growing increasingly brutal and unpredictable. In January 1976, 42-year-old Emily Jackson was brutally murdered in Leeds. Emily was a mother of 3, struggling to make ends meet after her husband's business fell on hard times. She had turned to sex work as a last resort, a desperate attempt to provide for her family. The killer picked her up on Roundhay Road, then drove her to a secluded industrial estate where he attacked her with a hammer and a screwdriver, leaving her body in a derelict yard. One of the most moving moments of the doco-series on Netflix was an interview with Emily Jackson's son, who actually had to go and identify her body, which is just horrific for a son to have to do. Emily's murder sent shockwaves through the community. The sheer brutality of the attack, the fact that she was a mother trying to support her children, intensified the growing fear and outrage. The killer's motive seemed clear: a twisted hatred of women, particularly those he perceived as vulnerable or on the margins of society. The police investigation intensified, but the killer remained elusive. The streets of Leeds and Bradford grew quieter as women became increasingly afraid to venture out alone, especially at night. The once vibrant nightlife of these cities dwindled, replaced by an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. In May 1976, the killer struck again, this time targeting 20-year-old Marcella Claxton. Marcella was walking home from a party when she accepted a ride from a stranger. It was a decision that would nearly cost her life. The killer attacked her with a hammer, leaving her for dead in Roundhay Park. Miraculously though, Marcella survived, but the attack left her with severe injuries, including brain damage and the loss of her unborn child. Her testimony would later prove crucial in identifying the killer, but the trauma she endured would forever alter her life. Now, these attacks on Emily Jackson and Marcella Claxton marked a turning point in the Yorkshire Ripper case. The killer's brutality was escalating, and his victims were no longer just women involved in sex work. The fear that gripped the community intensified, and the pressure on police to catch the perpetrator reached a fever pitch. The Yorkshire Ripper's reign of terror continued unabated, each new attack deepening the sense of fear and desperation that gripped the community. The police investigation, already massive in scale, intensified even further. But the killer remained elusive, his identity shrouded away in mystery. The documentary The Ripper on Netflix vividly portrays the mounting pressure on the police. The incident room, once bustling with activity, now felt like a pressure cooker. With the weight of the unsolved murders and public scrutiny bearing down on the investigators, the media frenzy surrounding the case only added to the tension, with headlines screaming about the Ripper's latest victim and demanding answers from the police. The year 1977 proved to be the killer's deadliest. In February, 28-year-old Irene Richardson was found murdered in Roundhay Park, Leeds. Irene was a woman who was battling addiction, trying to find her way in a world that had often turned its back on her. She had turned to sex work as a means of survival, a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of poverty and addiction. The killer's attack was merciless, leaving Irene's body battered and mutilated. Her murder sent even more shockwaves through the community, highlighting the vulnerability of women on the margins of society. The police faced mounting criticism for their perceived inability to catch the killer and their seeming indifference towards the victims, particularly those involved in sex work. The investigation was one of the largest in British history, involving thousands of officers and countless man-hours. But the sheer scale of the case, coupled with the limitations of technology and investigative techniques at the time, made it a daunting task. Detectives worked tirelessly, following up on every lead, interviewing countless witnesses, and meticulously examining the crime scenes. But the killer was always one step ahead, leaving behind few clues and exploiting the gaps in the investigation. The lack of a centralised database and the reliance on handwritten index cards made it difficult to connect the dots and identify patterns in the crimes. In April 1977, the killer struck again, this time claiming the life of 32-year-old Patricia or Tina Atkinson. Tina was a mother of 3, working as a sex worker to support her family. She was known for her infectious laugh and her kind heart, always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. But her life was tragically cut short when the killer brutally attacked her in her own flat in Bradford. The police found a boot print on her bedclothes, a chilling reminder of the killer's presence and his disregard for human life. Tina's murder shattered the lives of her children and loved ones, leaving them to grapple with the senselessness of her death. The community's fear intensified and women felt increasingly unsafe, even in the supposed sanctuary of their own homes. The police faced mounting pressure to catch the killer, but the investigation seemed to be at a standstill. In June 1977, he claimed the life of 16-year-old Jane McDonald. Jane was a bright and bubbly teenager, full of life and dreams. She had just started a new job as a shop assistant and was so excited about her future. But her life, like all the rest of the victims, was tragically cut short when she was brutally attacked and murdered on her way home from a night out with friends. The police found her body the next morning, discarded in a playground, a grim testament to the killer's depravity. Jane's murder was another devastating blow to the community. The fact that the killer had targeted such a young and innocent victim sent more shockwaves again through the nation. The police were under immense pressure to find the perpetrator, but the investigation seemed to be hitting dead end after dead end. The police were drowning in a sea of information, with thousands of tips and leads pouring in from across the country. But the lack of a centralised database and the reliance on outdated methods made it difficult to sift through the noise and identify the crucial pieces of the puzzle. The killer's ability to blend into society and his seemingly random selection of victims further complicated the investigation. In a cruel twist of fate, the investigation was further derailed by a series of hoax letters and tapes sent to the police, supposedly from the Ripper himself. The sender, who became known as Wareside Jack due to his distinctive Sunderland accent, which placed him in the Wearside region of England, taunted police and claimed responsibility for the murders. The obsession with Wearside Jack blinded the investigators to other potential leads, including the man who would eventually be revealed as the Yorkshire Ripper. The hoax's taunts and misleading information wasted valuable time and resources, allowing the real killer to continue his reign of terror. As the investigation floundered, the police resorted to increasingly desperate measures. In a controversial move, they issued a warning to women, advising them to stay indoors at night. This curfew, while intended to protect potential victims, sparked outrage and defiance. Women across Britain refused to be confined to their homes. They organised Reclaim the Night marches, as I said earlier in the intro, taking to the streets to demand an end to violence against women and the right to feel safe in their own communities. These marches were a powerful statement of defiance and solidarity, a testament to the strength and resilience of women in the face of adversity. The Reclaim the Night movement, born out of the darkness of the Yorkshire Ripper era, continues to resonate today. It serves as a reminder that women still face the threat of violence and harassment, and that the fight for equality and safety is far from over. The echoes of those marches can still be heard in the voices of women today who refuse to be silenced and who demand a world free from fear. Now, as the investigation intensified, the killer's motives became a subject of intense speculation. Was he driven by a hatred of women? Was he mentally ill? What dark forces compelled him to commit such heinous acts? The police, under immense pressure, sought the expertise of psychologists and profilers, hoping to gain insight into the mind of the Yorkshire Ripper. The search for answers led to a complex and often unsettling exploration of the human psyche. The Yorkshire Ripper case forced society to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil can lurk in the most unexpected of places, and that understanding the motivations of a killer is a daunting but necessary task in the pursuit of justice. The year is 1981. 5 long years have passed since that first brutal attack on Wilma McCann. The Yorkshire Ripper's reign of terror has cast a dark, dark shadow over the region, leaving a trail of fear, grief, and many unanswered questions. But in the midst of this darkness, a glimmer of hope emerges. It was a cold January night in the red light district of Sheffield. 2 observant police officers, Sergeant Bob Ring and probationary constable Robert Hydes, noticed a car parked suspiciously with a woman inside. Something just didn't feel right to them. The officers approached the vehicle and discovered that the car actually had false number plates. The driver, an seemingly unremarkable man, and his female companion were taken to the police station for further questioning. It was here, at the station, that Inspector Andrew Laptew, a seasoned detective with a keen eye for detail, noticed something peculiar. The man in custody bore a striking resemblance to the photo fit image of the Yorkshire Ripper that had been widely circulated. It was a moment of pure intuition, a gut feeling that would prove to be the turning point in the entire investigation. "That's him," Laptew exclaimed, his heart pounding in his chest. "That's the Ripper." While the man was detained for questioning, Ring and Hydes returned to the scene of the arrest. Hidden In nearby bushes, they made a chilling discovery: a hammer and a knife, tools that eerily matched the Ripper's modus operandi. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. The man, whose name was Peter Sutcliffe, was formally arrested and charged with the murders. During his interrogation, he confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper, providing details that only the predator could have known. The nightmare was finally over. The capture of Peter Sutcliffe brought a sense of closure to the community that had lived in fear for so many years. But it also raised a host of new questions. Who was this seemingly ordinary man who had committed such horrific acts of violence? What drove him to kill? And how had he managed to evade capture for so long? Now, the trial of Peter Sutcliffe was relocated to the Old Bailey in London from Yorkshire due to intense media scrutiny. It unfolded as a chilling expose of both his heinous crimes and the investigative missteps that allowed him to continue his reign of terror for so long. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecution meticulously laid out their case, presenting a mountain of forensic evidence that tied Sutcliffe directly to the murders. Bloodstains, fibres, and even tyre tracks linked him to the crime scenes. The courtroom was filled with a sense of dread as the gruesome details of his attacks were revealed. But perhaps the most impactful evidence came from the survivors of Sutcliffe's attacks. These brave women, some bearing the physical and emotional scars of his brutality, testified against their attacker, providing crucial identifications and harrowing details of their encounters. One survivor, Marcella Claxton, who was brutally attacked but miraculously survived, testified, "I saw his face. I will never forget it. He had cold, staring eyes, and he just kept hitting me with the hammer." Her words echoed through the courtroom, a stark reminder of the human cost of Sutcliffe's crimes. Sutcliffe's own confessions, recorded during police interviews, were also played in court. His chilling words recounting his crimes in graphic detail sent shivers down the spines of everyone present in that courtroom. In one confession, he stated, quote, "It was a miracle they survived. I left them for dead." The courtroom fell silent with that, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Sutcliffe's defence team attempted to plead diminished responsibility, arguing that he had suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and heard voices commanding him to kill prostitutes. This defence strategy, while controversial, highlighted the complexities of mental health and its intersection with criminal responsibility. The prosecution countered though, arguing that Sutcliffe's actions were premeditated and calculated, driven by a deep-seated hatred of women. They presented evidence of his meticulous planning, his stalking of victims, and his attempts to cover his tracks. The courtroom became a battleground of legal arguments and expert opinions, each side vying to sway the jury. After days of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: guilty on all 13 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and anger, the culmination of years of fear and uncertainty. Sutcliffe was sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment, with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 30 years. The trial and conviction of Peter Sutcliffe marked the end of a dark chapter in British history. But the scars left by his reign of terror would continue to haunt the community and the country for years to come. The Yorkshire Ripper case had exposed deep flaws in the criminal justice system and sparked a national conversation about violence against women and the complexities of mental health. Now, my culty crime crew, we've journeyed through the chilling details of the Yorkshire Ripper's crimes and the flawed investigation that allowed him to evade capture for so long. Now it's time to face the daunting task of trying to understand the incomprehensible, the mind of a killer. Peter Sutcliffe, this man behind the mask of the Yorkshire Ripper, was an enigma. To the outside world, he appeared to be an ordinary, a quiet truck driver, blending seamlessly into the fabric of society. But beneath the surface, a darkness was festering, fueled by a twisted blend of misogyny, religious delusion, and a profound sense of rage. In his own chilling words, Sutcliffe claimed he was on a divine mission to, quote, cleanse the street of prostitutes. He believed he was an instrument of God's wrath, tasked with punishing those he deemed immoral. But his victims weren't just sex workers. They were women from all walks of life, targeted seemingly at random. The disconnect between his supposed mission and the reality of his victims paints a disturbing picture of a mind warped by delusion and a twisted sense of morality. Now, I do want to be upfront with you all. I'm not a psychologist or a trained expert in any way whatsoever. But like many of you, I find the psychology of criminals fascinating, especially in cases like this. So, I want to explore some of the possible factors that may have contributed to Sutcliffe's horrific actions. Experts have offered various explanations for Sutcliffe's actions. Some point to his troubled childhood, marked by an abusive father and social isolation. He was reportedly bullied at school and struggled to fit in, perhaps fueling feelings of resentment and inadequacy that festered into adulthood. Not that that makes any sort of excuse for that stuff. Others highlight the challenges in his personal life, including the strains within his marriage and his perceived lack of control, suggesting that his attacks were a twisted way of exerting power and dominance over a world he felt had rejected him. Now, Sutcliffe's own confessions and the analysis of psychologists paint a picture of a deeply disturbed individual, consumed by a toxic mix of misogyny, religious delusion, and a profound sense of rage. He definitely harboured a deep-seated hatred of women, particularly those involved in sex work, viewing them as immoral and deserving of punishment. This distorted worldview, coupled with his underlying anger and frustration, created a fertile ground for violent fantasies to take root and ultimately manifest itself in reality. It's important to remember that while these psychological insights offer some understanding, they can never fully explain the depths of Sutcliffe's depravity. The pain and suffering he inflicted on his victims and their families is immeasurable, a scar that will forever mark the communities he terrorised. This Yorkshire Ripper case forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil can lurk in the most unexpected of places, but I think that's the case with most of the cases I do on this channel. It challenges us to examine the root causes of violence and misogyny, to question our own biases and assumptions, and to strive for a society where all individuals feel safe and valued. While the darkness of this case may never fully dissipate, it's important to remember the glimmers of hope that emerged from the tragedy. The bravery of the survivors, the tireless efforts of the investigators, and the resilience of the communities affected all serve as a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The Yorkshire Ripper case, one of the dark chapters in British history, continues to haunt us even today. The brutal murders of 13 women, the fear that gripped communities for 5 long years, and the flawed investigation that allowed the killer to evade capture for so long serve as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary people. The impact from this case was profound and far-reaching. It shattered the lives of countless families, leaving them to grapple with the unimaginable grief of losing a loved one in such a senseless and brutal manner. It exposed deep-seated societal issues, including misogyny, prejudice against sex workers, and the limitations of the criminal justice system. It sparked a national conversation about violence against women, and it's a conversation that continues to this day, and not only in the UK. This is all over the world this conversation happens. The Reclaim the Night marches, born out of fear and anger of the Yorkshire Ripper era, continue to inspire women today to fight for their right to safety and equality. The Yorkshire Ripper case also led to significant reforms in policing and the criminal justice system in the UK. The establishment of centralised databases, advancements in forensic science, and a greater emphasis on understanding the complexities of violence against women are all legacies of this tragic chapter in British history. This case also serves as a cautionary tale of the dangers of prejudice and the importance of treating all victims with dignity and respect. The initial focus on sex workers as potential victims, while yes, understandable given the early pattern of the attacks, it also revealed underlying societal biases that hindered the investigation and perpetuated harmful stereotypes. Peter Sutcliffe's reign of terror as the Yorkshire Ripper finally came to an end with his capture and his imprisonment. He spent decades behind bars, eventually succumbing to COVID-19 in 2020. But even in death, his name continues to evoke a sense of dread and fascination. The Yorkshire Ripper case remains a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that exists within humanity. The investigation into the Yorkshire Ripper case even briefly touched the life of another notorious British figure, Jimmy Savile. At one point, Savile, a beloved television personality who was later exposed as a prolific serial abuser, was considered a potential suspect at the time. He even had a cast made of his teeth to compare with bite marks found on one of the victims, which is just so weird. And then when you find out more about him, it's just even worse. Further adding to the unsettling nature of the case, Savile reportedly visited Sutcliffe multiple times during his imprisonment at the Broadmoor Hospital, a connection that raises disturbing questions about the potential links between these two infamous figures. I think I might do a Jimmy Savile episode soon, because I can't believe he got away with it. Another thing, got away with it for so long. The Yorkshire Ripper case is a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that the fight for justice and equality is an ongoing battle. It's a story that challenges us to confront the darkness within ourselves and our society, to learn from the past and to strive for a future where such tragedies are prevented. As we close this chapter on the Yorkshire Ripper, I'm left with a mix of emotions. Sadness, anger, disgust, but also a sense of gratitude for the brave investigators who tirelessly pursued this case. Yes, there was mistakes, but they tried their damn hardest. And also the survivors who shared their stories, giving a voice to the voiceless. This case serves as a chilling reminder, yet again, of the potential for evil to lurk in the most unexpected places. It underscores the importance of vigilance, accountability, and the need to challenge assumptions. Alright guys, I know these true crime stories can be a bit heavy at times. They can weigh on your heart and your mind, leaving you feeling a bit overwhelmed or even triggered at times. And you know what? That's okay. It's important to acknowledge those feelings and take care of yourself. If you're struggling with the darkness of this case or any other difficult emotions, please don't ever hesitate to reach out for help. If you're in Australia, you can call Lifeline Australia at 13 11 14. They are available 24/7 to provide crisis support and suicide prevention services. Now, for my international listeners, Befrienders Worldwide is a global network of crisis centres that offer emotional support to those who are struggling to cope. You can find their contact information at befrienders.org. And hey, speaking on mental health, I will be real with you all for a minute again. As I've spoken about before, I've dealt with my own mental health struggles, and it's taken me a long time to realise that it's okay to not be okay. I still have to remind myself every day of it, but it is okay. Sometimes in a weird way though, I find true crime a really good distraction from what's actually going on inside my head. It's like giving my brain something else to focus on, a way to escape from my own thoughts and feelings for just a little while. I know it might sound strange, my partner finds it so weird, but it works for me. And if you find comfort or distraction in true crime too, that's great, that's okay. But it is important to remember that it's not a substitute for any sort of professional help if you need it. And with that, my culty crime crew, we have reached the end of another episode. What did you guys think? This case throws me every time I look at it, or read about it, or hear about it. It gets me. But please, send me your thoughts, your feelings about this case. Send them over to my Instagram at cozy.cults.crimes. It's the same on TikTok as well, and it's cozy with a Z. I love to hear from you guys. It really does make my weeks when I get a message from you. So yeah, please send them my way. And yeah, as always, my culty crime crew, remember to stay safe, stay spooky, and never lose sight of the darkness. Thank you so much for tuning in again, my culty crew. I'm Bubbles, and I can't wait to welcome you back next week for another journey into the shadowy yet strangely comforting world of cozy cults and crimes. I'll see you next week. Bye!